Hey everybody, welcome to the DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen. With me as always, my brother Brendan, and together we make movies with DBS Films. On today's podcast, we are going to start going scene by scene through our past movies. After the last podcast we did where we kind of did the same thing for The Haunting in the Murder House, I honestly really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a great way to kind of flush out something that we have already made, what we like about the movie, what we learned about it. And then two, also give us an opportunity to talk about the movie in general and some of the ideas that we have when we want to look to remake them. This is a big question that we always get in our Discord community. So we figured it'd be a great way for us to go ahead, hop into some of our past movies and really get a better idea of what we liked with them, where we saw a lot of improvement, and give you guys an idea of if we wanted to remake it, the direction we'd go. As always, be sure to take a look at our Discord channel. We make movies for our fans, with our fans, and being part of that Discord channel is how you get access to all the behind the scenes fun and all of our casting and information. So in this episode, we are going to go scene by scene of our very first movie, Gone, give you guys a little bit of highlight, what we liked, what worked, what was actually something that, we learned a lot of, which again, being our first movie, there was a lot of learning. So before we hop into the actual movie itself, Brendan, do you kind of want to talk about how it's something we stress over and over again, but you really don't get the full level of experience until you've finished and completed the movie and you can review it like this. A lot of indie filmmakers will never get this luxury because they just end up dying in the void in the post-production stage. And unless you can really go back and look at a movie like this, you just don't know what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, I think it's two factors. The first factor is, in order to upload the movie, you have to have everything completed. So you have to have the sound design completed. You have to have good audio. You have to have good picture. You have to have the color completed. You have to have the score. Excuse me. And in order to get all that stuff done, you can't just, a lot of filmmakers just struggle with, having things sit around in post, or, they can tweak things until you hit that final upload button. You really can't give yourself, feedback. And I think the second factor is, once you upload it, you can kind of remove yourself from that project, because when you do upload the video, you're kind of like, all right, look, I completed this, and, I'm kind of taking a step back, and, you're like, look, I've done the best I could possibly do with this project. And I think you kind of remove a little bit of ego at that time, and you can give yourself, a bird's eye view of, what you did well, and, what you need to work on, essentially. So I think, being able to take a step back from the project, as opposed to just constantly being the project, constantly working on the project, or never finishing the project, you're never going to really get to that stage. And I think a lot of independent filmmakers just never get to the stage of, finally uploading something. And when they do upload something, I think that they just don't want to look at it. They've been so stressed out and so demoralized by the whole process that they just kind of shelf it and just kind of, turn a blind eye to it. And they're just like, look, this is what it is. It's completed. And I just want to kind of pretend it doesn't exist. I think that's a really bad mindset to have. I think, I love every single one of the movies that I've made, but I have to be the harshest critic, because that is how you get better. That's how you learn.
Yeah, that really is the case. And, I do think the big thing is kind of, as you were mentioning, it can be really hard for someone to just kind of finally look at their work and say, yep, this is, the finished product. This is the best it can be. Especially because most filmmakers will make one movie, possibly two movies. And the best thing that allows us to go back and now look at our first movie is, having so many more movies in between it and seeing the progression. It makes it much easier to go back and kind of do this process. So before we hop in detail, let's kind of give an overall, recap of Gone. Gone Again was the very first movie that launched it all. It really kind of was just the foray into the whole movie making process. And to me, it's something where it's like, we just we were so unaware of what could possibly be wrong with this process that it was just, the very first experience in movie making. We learned a very quick critical error of, backups and what ends up happening someone on a team will accidentally delete some of the footage and that caused reshoots. So I think it's kind of standard things will go wrong for it. But it was also, I think it wasn't that ambitious. We did pull in the core concept, which helped out a bunch. So I think it was honestly, all in all, a very, very solid first attempt at a filmmaking process. What do you kind of feel about our attempt with Gun? Because to me, it's really something where, because it's the first part or the first one that we've done, it just gets a ton of credit for that.
Yeah, I mean the whole goal was to just get something uploaded. I mean, it's the goal with all our movies, but this one, I had no idea what I was trying to do. I had no idea how to make a movie. We had a good idea of how to write a script and a story because of the publishing business, but the technical aspect of how to actually shoot this was completely foreign to me. We were working with a new crew, and I was leaning on this crew to, really help us out. The people that we worked with before, they had experience doing corporate videos, not so much cinematic stuff. But I figured, well, we could, help them, try and tell the story via visual elements. As long as they know how to technically shoot, make sure that the camera is properly exposed and how to use the more technical equipment. So, it was a goal was to just go out there for 5 days and try and shoot something. This is back when Amazon was telling us to do anthology stuff. So we were going to try and do 7 or 8 different little anthology series that were about 30 minutes each, similar to like a mini Black Mirror episode of horror. So Gone was the first test episode, the pilot. And I just went out there and we shot it, and I had very low expectations. I wasn't involved in the process pretty much at all. I let one of the writers direct the movie because I wanted to sit back and just try and see how the process worked, and where I could optimize and try and figure out the best way to learn how to run a successful set, run a successful indie production. And I mean, that's when I started to just figure things out on the fly. And I think that's the best way to do it. You just have to kind of jump head first into it and just kind of figure out how things operate. There is no better teacher than experience.
Yeah, it really is one of those things where, if looking back now, it definitely is the case of, I think the best advice we can always offer is, jump right into this, really go ahead and just learn all of the elements of the movie making process yourself as much as you possibly can, just because even the mistakes that you make, you're going to directly learn from them. So it's always great to point back to that. Gone itself, I mean, I'm kind of curious now, what you would synopsis it. I think it's kind of an alien movie, I would say, is the way we do it. We don't really show the creature, but to me it's kind of like an alien abduction movie. There's some weird twist elements where they walk around, electricity doesn't work, very, minor stuff. But what would you kind of classify Gone as? Because I mean, to me it's almost something where, since we didn't really draw too much specifics in the story, we left a lot open. There's a lot that can be drawn of like what this movie is actually about.
Yeah, it's a mix of like Blair Witch and like a like an alien creature. The problem is we didn't have the budget to get like a creature excuse me, to get a creature in there actually. So we played with what's in our means, which was like, all right, it's a creature, but it could be like the UFO, which is why it has lights and it does like kind of shock. There's like aliens in the woods. Is what we were trying to go with. So we wanted those kind of elements to it. Looking back on it, probably was not a good idea. I think we could have just done a witch, been a better movie. But it was just, we wanted to run with something, and this was something that we were able to work with within our budget, which I think is half the battle to get, a screenplay that fits what you're trying to do. We couldn't afford a mask. We couldn't afford a creature. We couldn't afford special effects. So, we got something made and we got it done within our means, and we were able to learn from it, which I think is a super valuable experience.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, it really is something where it shows you once it's completed, where it can kind of take shape and kind of come to fruition. I think one thing that honestly really surprises me with Gone is there's actually a lot of people in the Discord channel who are huge fans of Gone. They kind of like the mysterious nature to it. I would say they typically pick up on the whole alien element, considering it kind of like an abduction or just kind of this mystery of what's going on in the wood, what's causing these issues, what's going through. There's even an element. One of the Discord members has like a theory on even the idea that Brad's just kind of making it up, going through the mental struggles of losing his dad. So there's a lot of stuff that, because there's not the guidelines of the story, which is something that we didn't learn until the Devil in the Room and the Morgan estate. There's a lot of open on flexibility to that. So we are going to go ahead, hop in now. We're going to walk through kind of the scenes of Gone and just kind of get an idea of what we thought of them, what we could have done, what we might have done instead. Gone is actually not available online. The only place you can find is if you're in our Discord channel. So if you do want to see it, you'll have to go take a look there. If you have seen it, though, hopefully you'll enjoy this as we kind of go along, give you guys an idea of what we liked, how we kind of feel. So, I think the first thing that I'm actually really surprised about, and it kind of goes to the roots of, DBS a little bit, is, we did a really good job with our very first intro girl scene. We had the intro girl running through the forest, running through the woods. She's panicked. She's upset. There's a really good shot actually where she cowers behind the tree. And then there's our monster, which is the flashlight. And I mean, honestly, for just a flashlight and a light, the way it kind of works and the way it kind of gives off is, there's terror, it's ominous, it picks you up, it tells you it's a horror movie. And I think it's honestly really surprising how good the intro scene is.
Yeah, I think the best intros that we've done so far are, we have pretty much two intros. The first is the one which we did in Gone, which is the quick, very vague and ambiguous, like who's getting chased or what's happening kind of thing. And the second one would be something like Whitlow, or what we do at the Murder House, where it's like a slow burn with a high climax. I think what we learn from pretty much all the intros, the one that do best are the ones where they keep it vague. You don't really want to give away what's really happening because it kind of creates the intrigue and the mystery. You can build some lore in there, but you still want to kind of keep it vague. I think this one's starts off with the girl running in the woods. You don't really know what's chasing her. You don't really know what that light is. And the actual final cut didn't have the girl cut, or the original cut didn't have that shot of the girl behind the tree. That was actually a pickup shot that we did because we deleted the footage. I believe before that, it was just her running through the woods and then a light comes over her and it cuts to black. I think we added a little bit. We added some blood to her nose or on her face. And that was just done because we had to do pickups because we lost that footage. So, losing the footage, while it was extremely frustrating, it number one taught us proper data management, and we did get some better shots out of the film. We used another DP who just had a more artistic style to him, had a better understanding of lenses and how to properly get like proper bokeh behind it. So it just looks a little bit more cinematic, as opposed to the other DP who was just doing a lot of wide shots. But I like the intro. I think it's a good, solid intro. She does trip and fall. Don't do trip and falls. It's very difficult for the actor to actually portray that safely. It still kills me. It just looks like a cartoon. I think just running through the woods would have been completely fine. So I think, other than that, I think that's the only thing that really bothers with me. I think it's a quick, gets to the point, it cuts to, the title screen and you're into the movie. If I'm watching this, I'm like, all right, like I'm kind of intrigued. I want to see what that light was. I don't really know if this is an alien or monster movie, but I'm willing to keep watching.
Yeah, it really is something where, first minute and a half is really solid of the hook there. And it's something that when I watch it now, it's always still surprising just because I feel like that was very good execution. That was the pickup scene that we did to add into it, but it really does tie it together. And, luckily, again, we always say, if you're going to have something good, make sure it's the intro. So, I think that's a huge, huge advantage having an intro like that. just in the grand scheme of things, because it can be so flat if you miss in that intro, as we've seen in some of the movies. So with that, we have textbook indie scene number 2. I think it's a classic, and that is someone is in a car. So, I think we've developed our taste for car scenes over the course of filming, specifically because of how long they take and how cumbersome they can be. I think we've kind of firmly landed on the idea that, don't do them, unless you have a specific rig for shooting the car. It always seems like it's an indie thing that people think is, oh, it's a quick, easy scene we can do. It typically takes a while, and it usually comes off pretty flat. So you want to talk about just why you're not a fan of the car scenes anymore, and then kind of why it's a really textbook indie trope of, cutting right to it, just because it allows for any kind of lore dump and something like that, especially with what we did, which was a phone call to mom.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of car stuff because it's you're super in a really tight spot. It's really hard to make your car look cinematic. The lighting's coming in from the windows, so it's very difficult to control the lighting. The car is moving, so it's bouncing around. Audio is really hard to get. And I see it time and time again. Indie filmmakers are like, oh, it's a free location. Let's just do a car scene. Don't do it. It's just not, it's very, very difficult to make it look good. If you want to do a car scene, just do like a drone shot over it, and you'll see this as a popular indie trope, but this one actually works. Get a nice cinematic car transition shot with your drone, and it looks cinematic. It looks good. It's a great sequence from a title screen on, so it'll be fine. As far as the problem I think with Gone is that he didn't have a girlfriend or someone else with him, because from this point where you are in the movie now, where he's in the car, to when he actually meets the neighbors, there's no dialogue, like, other than like he talks to himself and his mom. And I think the mom plot line is just us not knowing how to write a screenplay, because it can be completely cut. And the plot line of him going up there for to jump his dad's ashes could be cut. It's stupid. And it just comes down to, like, when you're writing a screenplay, really try and keep it as simple as possible. And I think that stuff, it did give him like a little bit of character depth, but I think it just took away, it slowed the movie down so much, and it made it so like over dramatic. Like, I think this movie suffers from a problem that a lot of our other movies did, similar to like what happened to The Devil in the Room. It's just so dramatic, and it's difficult to pull that off without, you have to have purpose and intent with your drama, when it's just kind of thrown in there to just be like, all right, here's this drama. People don't like it, and it just comes off as very cheesy. I think if you had just taken this movie and made it look, it's Brad and like his girlfriend or brother or family member are going up to the cabin for a weekend to getaway. Maybe you could still have the dad thing in there. Now I'm thinking about it's probably not that bad, but they need another character to talk to, because immediately you're going from a car scene to another thing they don't really like, which is phone conversations. And so right off the bat, it's just, you're going from a really good intro to a scene that is about a minute of just driving dialogue. You don't see the mother talking, so it's very boring. And then, you're getting an even longer sequence of him going up into the cabin to even get there. So you're starting off really strong, but you lose the momentum very, very quickly. And if I were willing to bet, I would say people probably dropped off even before he even got to the cabin, just because that's like almost like a 2-minute sequence of just car driving stuff, monologue, dialogue, and just not very good cinematography.
Yeah, and I think, again, it goes back to, there's a lot of issues with the movie, but if you look at the story and the pacing, it is something we talk about a lot, where, you need to have a different character to try and talk to at least progress it. And being a solo character, I think that really does haunt the movie a lot, because there's a lot of scenes with Brad just kind of moping around, because he doesn't really quite have anything else to do besides that. So I think that's probably one of the bigger things that we found. We'll most likely for sure have a different character, like a girlfriend or something like that, just to add to it. And yeah, I mean, I think it also was back with the dramatic DBS stage where it seems like each one of our characters had like some type of really dramatic relationship with a family member or something like that, that just had to be a needless spice that we've kind of learned to, unless it's really adding to the movie, what's it doing. But I think that kind of, goes back to us not knowing the pacing element to it. And I think a great example of that is, once he gets to the cabin, we're talking about things are pretty slow. From there, he goes, he puts his dad's box with the ashes on the table. He, sits down on the bed real quick. He looks at the ashes, he looks at the urn, and then, he goes to the dock. So before going to the dock, I mean, like, I think back when we were first writing this in your head, it's always more action packed than it kind of is when you see it. And I think in our, like, when you're going through this and you read it, you're like, oh, he puts it down there. He's sad on the bed. He goes and he ponders the urn. Like, all of these things make sense, but then you see it and you're just like, oh my goodness gracious, this is slow. So, you want to talk about how it just is something where I think for us, really, I mean, we'll talk about it when the first upbeat's coming up, but these downbeats are incredibly flat at this point in time in DBS.
Yeah, it needed so it needed he can get into that cabin, and I would have had him pull up at night, and I would have had some kind of pop scare, something bad happen immediately outside the cabin that is jarring, but it's not super jarring, but it lets you know that's a horror movie. Because right now, up until this point, and it's even going to get worse when he goes to the dock, you're confusing people. Do not confuse your audience. We started off as a horror movie. Girl gets killed in the woods by a mysterious force. And now we have 4 or 5 minutes of just a heavy drama. This is a drama movie, right? This guy's dealing with loss. He's dealing with his father's loss. This isn't a horror trope. This isn't a horror movie. People have no idea what they're getting into. People who want to watch a horror movie are going to turn this off. So I think you would have had him, I would have just montaged the car scene up with a drone. I would have had him get to the cabin. Maybe it's a family cabin. He's not really comfortable with it too much. Moves around in there, and then something happens. You get some kind of pop scare in there. Nothing too crazy, but enough to remind people that this is a horror movie. And I think at that point, it'd be a much better script. Horror people will continue to watch it. And I think you'd be able to just continue moving forward, as opposed to right now, people have no idea what this movie is.
Yeah, I think, again, and this goes back to kind of that pacing element of it. You want to be very clear and very specific with it. So we mentioned it's kind of dragging here. This is by far my favorite scene. This is probably 2 of my favorite scenes combined here, which is the dock scene. So they show up to the dock scene. First off, the dock scene is kind of a lesson in exposure, just for the way that it's colored and everything. And I mean, hey, this is what happens when you go into post-production and the shot's not quite there when you put on the color correction. But then you have Brad giving a monologue, and like, I mean, this is, this isn't an epic character that we've created here. This isn't like, it's not a character that has a lot of equity to cash in a monologue with the audience right now. So 7 minutes in, we get our main character who literally has just been kind of like complaining to his mom, and then is looking sad the whole time. He walks out into the dock and he has a monologue with his dad in a margarita shaker. So this is back to the prop element of it. Hey, whatever, I love it, but this whole thing to me, it feels overly forced. It feels, hey, this is drama, what this is, and again, this goes back to, I think, our screenwriting. And it's like, you want to have this character here, but I feel like we've learned you want to keep it simple, and you got to understand that you're not cashing these checks of these characters being able to have like a monologue or whatnot. These are straightforward characters, and you want to have pacing. So that's at least kind of how I feel now. Is, it is one of those things where early on looking at it, I think we just misunderstood kind of what people are actually looking for characters, and more importantly, what we can actually pull off. So, what are kind of your feelings about this 7-minute monologue that we had coming about?
Well, I mean, this is why it's important to go back and review the stuff that you've shot. I mean, it's going to teach you how to become a better writer. We just didn't have an understanding of, how to write a screenplay that fits the horror genre at this time. And trust me, we are not the only people to make these mistakes. Honestly, Gone is probably a much better movie than a lot of first-time independent filmmakers make. But that being said, we suffered from the same issues that I see a ton of other indie films suffer from. First is this movie is confusing everyone who's watching it right now, especially with this scene. So it was confusing people before. This puts it way over the top. They have, at this point, I'm thinking this is a drama movie. I have no idea what was going on that first part of the movie, but this is a drama. So already you're confusing people. We're not keeping it simple at all. Number two, like, as far as like the characters and this monologue, it's like, yeah, man, if this is like, you just can't have these giant long dialogue scenes for no reason. And I think that we're just complicating a story that should be very, very simple. And for our experience in the movies that have done the best, have been the simplest. Look, get your characters to a location and scare those characters. That's all you have to do. The audience cares more about the situations that you put your characters in than they do about the characters. Now, this only pertains to horror. Don't try and do that in like a drama or comedy or any other kind of trope. This is for horror. The audience likes the monsters and the situations, and they want them to be relatable, right? And, a primal, relatable situation that scares people. And nothing about this movie is scary. Nothing. We haven't created any kind of situations right now. So it's just, we're going all over the place, and we're blowing this character up to a point where, it's just, we're wasting minutes of this movie for no reason. And then finally on the urn, and why we used a margarita shaker, to buy an urn is like $300. Like, they were really expensive, and I didn't want to buy that. So I was like, all right, let's try and use this margarita shaker that kind of looks like an urn, I guess. And I told the DP, I was like, hey man, like, don't put this in the shot, right? Because it looks like a margarita shaker. And all the footage that came back is pretty wide, and you could tell it's a margarita shaker. But really, I don't think anybody brought that up. Maybe one or two reviews brought it up, but I still have, I think I still have that margarita shaker in the bar in my apartment. So I think it's kind of fun. But I wasn't going to break the bank for something that should have never been in the movie in the first place.
That's a big one. I think we learned, don't write things you can't really have access to. So immediately go from the dock to by far my favorite scene of that, which is Brad comes home and washes his dad's ashes off of his hands. Now, again, I would say, a very talented group of writers and everything that we worked with. But I think one of the early issues that we had when it came to these stories is you have very minimal attention and focus you can bring on what the actual plot is. And I think in a lot of our earlier movies, there's a lot of fluff of, well, this is a symbolism of him washing his conscience, or, well, this represents this. And like, I feel like we've learned that like all that stuff just needs to be cut out there. Like, just, don't even try and do like witty references or metaphors or things like that, because you're just kind of not at that level. So, in regards to him washing his hands off, I just kind of want to get your quick idea, because I think it's something we see all the time in indie films. is some really far stretch metaphor that becomes incredibly obvious, and you think you're being clever, but just because of the execution, you kind of get with a scene where you're just like, what the heck's going on? I think we see it all the time in indie filmmaking.
I mean, I think you see it all the time in Hollywood movies too. I think it's just something that I think it works if you're getting the main plot points and the main story done correctly. Then you can kind of spice it up. Those things do add to the story. But if you're not getting your main plot and your main story structure completed properly, and you start focusing on that kind of stuff, then it's like it's like a double whammy. It's gonna make people are gonna start to look at this, and it's gonna feel out of place, and it's gonna make people focus more on that kind of stuff, and it's just gonna, you know, ruin your movie. Look, it's great to have symbolism. I think like if you can put that stuff in your movie, but you really got to like be very delicate with it. It's almost like a very fine spice. You have to be very, very careful. You can't over like spice your essentially your meal, which is your movie. And I think a lot of indie filmmakers go in there and they just dump it all in there, and it just is not good. I think you have to really just focus on the meat and potatoes first, and then if you have the opportunity to put that stuff in there, go ahead. I think with Gone, and I think this is a good analogy, is just like why all this stuff, why the dock scene hurts so much, why him like laying in the bed hurts, and why the bathroom scene hurts is because we didn't have another character. So there really was nothing else other than for him to do than this stuff. And when he's doing this kind of stuff, because we have no other plot or there's no story direction, it's just like, what is this guy doing? So I think it's just a lot of fundamental mistakes. First time, filmmaker, screenplay, writing mistakes that we made. But once again, we learned from them and we got better. And I'm a firm believer of the mistakes that you make, if you take the time to learn from them, are more valuable than the things that you did well, because now we know not to do a lot of this stuff next time. And, Gone really structured how we made our screenplays moving forward. So it's, it's such a necessary thing to just kind of throw yourself in the fire and just learn, because we got so much better after this movie. Because the next movie, The Invited, which is still kind of a flaming car wreck, was a much better structured movie, because we learned how to properly, go back and fix the mistakes that plagued this movie.
Yeah, I really do think, you do start seeing one of the major issues there being Brad being all by himself, because the next scene after he finishes washing his hands, we see Brad unpacking, plugging in his cell phone, and then going to sleep. All stuff that you don't even need to show that. You can just cut right to it. And this would be, I guess, our second reference that this is a horror movie, which is the lights flashing while he's sleeping. So again, nothing too intense, but the flashlight on the window. And then he wakes up in the morning and his phone isn't charged. So, that's kind of the spice element to it. And I think, if you look at that in your head when you write it, you can understand it's like, oh, that's suspense, things happen there. But I think one thing we learned as we continue to move forward is like, man, when we're spicing it up with these jump scares and these pop scares, you got to go to 10. You got to go. It's mortal danger until it's either, hey, it's someone so it's not really a pop scare, or yes, it is something scary and you need to get away from it. But I think with this movie, because it'll tie right into the next scene, which is the car not starting, so might as well let's hop right into that too. Right after his phone not being charged, our first real scare in the sense of what we thought was going to be a big beat was he gets in the car and it doesn't start. Now, here's the thing. This is natural with horror movies. It would almost be more predictable, for the car to start than not to start. But do you want to talk about how our concept of a pop scare, because I think we saw it too with The Invited, like with the Dimitri, with the wrist cut and things like that. You really got to swing for the fences and chop with the scares, because you got to go all out nowadays. You really don't even have people's attention on your movie. So even if it's a noise or something, you got to get their attention.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between like a pop scare and a scare that is just weird and mysterious. Like Dimitri cutting his hand, weird and mysterious. Car not starting is weird and mysterious. Versus like hard pop scares. And I think like you have to have a mix of both. But I mean, like at this point in this movie, like you gotta be hitting him hard here. And I would have had him probably go outside at some point, like drinking some beers, and then put him in a trash bag and throw him in the trash bag and walk away. And then like you see a shadow figure knock the trash over, and he like turns away for like a pop scare. And he doesn't know what that was. And that would have worked fine if you just had a creature dart across the screen real quick, and knock over the trash cans. Or you could do what we did in the Girl in Camera 13, we just slam the trash can hard. But you have to get something like, I mean, even at this point, you have to show there's a creature, something is out there that's going to threaten his life. Like, I think the problem with this movie is there's no tension, right? We don't know that his life is actually in danger until one of the other characters gets taken in the movie. And I think we just waited too long to do that. I think, yes, the audience knows that he's in danger because they killed the girl in the beginning, but he doesn't know that. And I think that's part of the reason why the car starting doesn't work, because there's no tension. If his car doesn't start, it's like, oh no, like I got to call AAA. But if he needed to get out of there and the car doesn't start, I think you get more of an impact. So I think we just kind of, the pacing, the structure of this movie was just off. But I mean, like looking back on it, it has some pieces in there. We just weren't skilled enough or didn't have enough experience to put them in the proper order and have them have the proper impact on the viewer.
Yeah, I think, kind of as we mentioned before, it would be cutting a lot of the fluff and then just amping up the scare. I mean, really to this one, you'd almost have to kind of do a full main overhaul of like the characters, in the sense of adding more characters or whatnot, and then spicing it up. But you can easily do like a couple and another couple, have them meet up earlier. I think one of the other things is it's in the middle of the day. And, that's another element of not being scary, is bright sunshine everywhere. So we have Brad. And again, at this point in time, Brad's literally just mumbling to himself. It's pretty much just like, oh gosh darn it, the thing didn't start. Like, you're kidding me. And like, I mean, that's just tough to do to a character, because when we watch these movies for Movie Monday for the Discord, he's just moping. He's kind of like Eeyore. And I mean, that's the character that we have for him. He's doing a great job executing on this character that's just like Bad Luck Brian, where everything's going wrong slightly, nothing's scary, but it's just inconvenient. So he's moping, he sets off, he knocks on the door, and we get our other two characters. And this again, this is a massive step up, because now we have people talking to each other. So this, honestly, the knock at the door scene where it's like, hey, can I use your phone? This, I think, to me is like textbook, just awkward conversation that we go through. Because like, if you watch this scene, it's like, hey, can I use your phone? He like goes in there, and she's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm trying to use my phone. Where's your phone? She's like, what's going on? And he's like, there's a person over there. He needs to use the phone. And it's like, but my phone doesn't work. Like, it's just talking through the plot instead of showing. So he kind of finds himself in this situation, and then they both basically say, okay, well, nothing's working. Let's go try our car. Oh, hey, our car doesn't work. And now they're both in this situation. And that is a good 3-minute scene. So do you want to kind of talk about how now I think we've learned that, our version of this, of, hey, the phones aren't working, it's typically panic now. It's typically too far, too late, too gone. There's no repercussion. I think it's just what you mentioned, where the phones not working now are very critical. Whereas now it's just this weird, slight inconvenience of our characters kind of walking back and forth and being like, I guess this isn't working.
Yeah, I think to sum this movie up, it's just like Brad's adventure with small inconveniences. There's no tension or like forebodingness or threat on his life or danger. So there's no like, why should I be invested in this movie? Oh no, his cell phone doesn't work. Oh no, his car doesn't work. What's he gonna do? Like, oh geez. I think that's the biggest problem. There's no like life or death. There's no like higher tension There's no stakes is what I'm looking for. So I think that's a problem. And as far as like the dialogue going, this is a big time indie mistake too. It's just like they'll repeat the plot or they'll repeat what they've already shown you or what the viewer's already seen. And you really have to make sure that every piece of dialogue, every conversation is just moving that plot forward. You have to constantly be pushing that plot forward. If you're not, you're in trouble. And it's really the way that I write dialogue now, because I suffered with dialogue for so long, was just if you can push the plot forward with dialogue, it'll make your dialogue interesting. And it can be very simple. Try and keep your dialogue simple. You don't need to get too complicated. But usually the dialogue that pushes the plot forward, accelerates the plot, is way more interesting than dialogue that just either restates or just kind of sits there. And I think there's a fine line and it's kind of a scale because obviously you can't just push everything 0 to 100 constantly. You have to develop some of your characters. But for the most part, if you're struggling with dialogue, try and really push it forward. And I think your dialogue will just get sharper and quicker and you'll move out of that scene. If you're struggling with a scene to write dialogue, then that would be my advice, as opposed to trying to just get really clever and witty dialogue. Because on an indie level, you can write the most clever dialogue as you possibly can, but getting the performance that you want, the performance that's in your head from your actors, is going to be very, very difficult as well. So you can write good dialogue, but getting that performance is going to be difficult. But if you push the dialogue forward, push your plot forward, it's a little bit easier to get a performance because you're running off of emotion. And when you're running off of emotion, it's easier for actors to actually get to that spot and give a better performance.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest issue is, not having that natural progression of the plot just leaves them kind of stuck on an island with these dialogue choices that we were given to them. And it makes it really, really hard to just kind of pace through it. So, with that being said, we're basically halfway through this movie right now. So, I want to go ahead and kind of close out this part of the episode, and we're going to go and finish the rest of it in the next episode that we have. Everything we know now, I want to try and take a look, what would we do differently with kind of the core concept of going to the camp. And I'm really just kind of interested, how would you what would we do to get from this halfway point on? I would say of all the movies, Gone usually is one we don't talk too much about. I feel like we kind of have some of the other movies dialed in a little bit more. But I'll go ahead, I'll shoot first in the sense that, I think I like the idea of an alien invasion similar to like a Signs type movie. I think if you have another group, I think you can do it where it's a couple going out there. I think you can even keep the dad thing. I think that could be sentimental. And I think you could tie some type of things there. With his dad being brought out to the forest or anything. I think the critical thing is he needs to have a girlfriend or something like that. As you mentioned, as soon as they get there would be like a pop scare, and I have things going weird. Then I would have them meet up with the other couple. But I think the way I would have the couple meet up would be like Stacy or someone bangs on the door at night and says that someone got stolen, like really hyped up and whatnot. So I think that would kind of be my progression to the midway point, without any details. But I think the biggest one is having another person, and then again, just having night things that are pushing it. So if you had to redo Gone up into the halfway point, what would kind of be your take at it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would do the core concept would be there's like an alien in the woods, some kind of creature in the woods. Um, I'll keep the father's ashes, but I would have like two brothers going up there. And maybe they're not very similar. Maybe they're going up there to dump the father's ashes, and they're just they're not very close. Maybe they were close when they were younger, but they're kind of going up there to do it for themselves. They get to the cabin at night. I'd have them go dump the ashes or whatever. Something spooky happens in the woods. There's like a creature in the woods, but it's all very like pop scary kind of thing. They go back to the cabin, they drink some beers, maybe they start to reminisce on like their childhood. They go throw out the trash. You get another pop scare there. Then they go to bed, and you'd have to introduce like another character that lives down the cabin. Maybe it was another kid that they grew up with in the area, and he can, he scares them. And then maybe he can probably bring up some lore about the alien, or there's like a creature or something's like killing his livestock or something along those lines. Um, and then you probably would need another character. You would need something like he would either need to die, or someone needs to be like dead right at this point, the halfway point of the movie. Probably that guy would have to die, or there would have to be like a slaughtered animal or something that would be like, all right, look, your life is in danger at this point. So I think you can do it. It would need a significant rehaul, but I mean, the pieces are there. I mean, you can definitely work with it.
Yeah, I think, and again, it is something where it's always great seeing the feedback from like the super fans and the community, how kind of that idea and not knowing what's there. And it's always something when people are like, oh, I like Gone. I think people like it because of the open-endedness too, because they're kind of trying to solve it and what it is. But I think everything that you mentioned there, a clearer plot, again, we don't really necessarily even have there's not really any lore dumps here. So I think that's actually something to kind of be a good touch on the end of it. I think when you really look at it, it's missing that basic structure line of what actually it is. And now even kind of, I think in our heads in the writing ones, we're kind of leaving it open-ended, but I think that is one of the biggest issues that you can have, and people kind of like being mysterious. But do you want to talk on, how I think now our opinion is you want to be as straightforward and to the point as possible. This is exactly what it is. This is exactly what happens. I'm going to explain it to you multiple times versus just, ooh, something suspicious might be going on.
Yeah, if you're vague, you're gonna have a bad time. And you can be vague about like the backstory of the thing or the creature or where it came from, and like, yeah, you can let the audience kind of figure that out. That's fun. But man, you gotta be like, all right, this is an alien, this is a creature. Like, this is why I was like saying like another guy needs to come to this cabin and be that lives in the area and is like, hey, like, have you seen anything out here? Like, my dogs are going nuts out here. Like, we're seeing things like, maybe my power went out. There's weird stuff going on here. And he can be almost like a conspiracy guy, and he just be like, I think it's the aliens, or he can be like, there's a creature out here, I swear. And they're just like, this guy's, he's crazy. Don't listen to him. But someone needs to come in there and be like, look, this is what this is. There's something in these woods. It's dangerous. And you guys need to be careful. And usually the indie way to do that is like the guy's just over the top and they just are like, nah, this guy's crazy. Like, don't listen to him. But I mean, you can also build sort of a little bit of a mystery where one of the characters kind of puts it all together themselves. But either way, you have to be very clear exactly what the viewer is getting into, especially at the halfway mark. At the halfway mark of this movie, it should you should be able to have three goals already like attained. The first should be what creature this is, and you should have a general idea of what they're about, like what the creature is capable of doing. Two, the lives of the people in your movie should be in danger, or there should be a threat. And three, there needs to be some kind of climactic action to thrust your audience into the next half of the movie. It has to be something very jarring. Something, this is why I was like, some kind of animal has to get killed, a person needs to get killed, something needs to happen that just takes them from their ordinary life and throws them into this crazy world, because obviously the next thing's them going to try and get out of there, and then your car's going to start, or they just can't get there. But I mean, this is for all horror movies. At the halfway point, you really have to be moving this audience into the second half of the movie, and the stakes have to be pretty high at this point to keep the audience engaged.
Yeah, if you don't have those stakes, if you don't have that plot, if you don't have that specifics, you really at this point in time want to have a very clear path forward for them. And, again, with it being our first movie, I think that's something that takes a while to learn in itself. And it really is something that it shows a lot when we're reviewing this. So in our next episode, we're going to continue for the rest of Gone, kind of give you an idea of how we might put the rest of the movie together if we had to look at redoing it, which again, I'd love to revisit, because again, it's something where the Discord and the super fans are big fans of it. which always shows us that, hey, there's actually something there. So as always, be sure to take a look at us online. Check out our Discord channel. Our newest movie, The Haunting of the Murder House, is now live on Amazon Prime. And if you guys go ahead, take a look at that, rent it, leave us a review, we will greatly appreciate it. And in the next episode, we're going to go ahead and finish up on Gone. But until then, have a good one.